Hey guys, what's up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, let's go over the market. Let's go over Tesla. Let's see what we can dissect on the first day of the week. And also, I believe almost the last day, tomorrow's the last day of the month. And we go to February for trading. Now, anyways, all that being said and done, let's jump into it, guys. If you enjoy the video, as usual, don't forget to hit that like button. It does help quite a bit. On top of that, none of this is financial advice. Make your own decisions, do your own research, all of that good stuff. But yeah, all that being said and done, dumping right into it. I mean, it was a dump day, but jumping right into it as well. Tesla ended the day at $166.77, which is about a 6.3% move to the downside. So, unsurprisingly, like I said previously, right, this 180-ish area, all the way up as high as almost like even 200, really. But especially this 180-ish area, should act as a decent resistance, right? And I did talk about that on, not yesterday, but Friday. That's essentially what we're seeing as of right now. Now, the big question, of course, is this a top? Is it all doom and gloom from here, or like what's the deal, right? So let's talk about that. That's, I'm sure, the main question, right? So yeah, let's jump into it. So Tesla, it is falling. It did close a little bit lower than I would have liked to see it, at least for the bulls. The bulls definitely wanted to see a little bit of a higher close than this. Not too crazy, but definitely like at least a 0.5% higher, I would say, than what we ended up getting. So it's a little bit unfortunate. But with that being said, the market, so for instance, SPY, you can see, is sitting at exactly that 400 level right now, which is important to hold for SPY. And in my opinion, if SPY can actually hold this level for now and get a bounce off of 400, that'd be pretty good for Tesla, because then Tesla might actually have that as its cushion, I guess, you know what I mean, to get a little bit of a bounce from here as well. So that's one thing to pay attention to. But overall, the main thing I'll be looking at here is this, right? Personally, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a very, very short-term top, right? So that main thing to discuss from there is, of course, well, okay, assuming this is going to be a short-term top and we do get an actual rejection from here, which as of right now, it seems like that's exactly what we're getting. Because on top of that, we also essentially have an inside day today, right? Where the candle is essentially smaller than the previous day's candle, and it's pretty much fully encapsulated within the previous day's candle. In this case, Friday's candle is fully encapsulating today's candle and today's movement. You can see, right? The highs of Friday and the lows of Friday, today's day and the trading range did not breach either of those, and it stayed within it the whole day. That is an inside day candle, which usually is a sign of a form of a reversal. Now, of course, it's not guaranteed. Nothing in this market is ever guaranteed, but that is a major thing that I'm sure a lot of people are looking at and paying attention to. So with that being said, if this is the very short-term top and we do get a retracement from here, how low do we go? The first level potentially that we can actually just get a straight up bounce off of, and potentially go higher, which I still believe about 200, or like essentially a higher high than this is in play. As high as 200 is still in play, as long as we don't really go far below like 150. As long as we really don't go below 150, and especially 141, which are essentially the 0.382 and the 0.5 fibs. So like the final level for me that I would definitely not want to see Tesla go lower is pretty much 140. Slash this gap fill at 144. That would be like the lowest level I'd want to see, assuming you still want to see Tesla rally up to, let's say, about 200 or maybe slightly below 200 or something, along the levels of that, right? So that's very important, at least in my opinion, that does not happen. Now, with that being said, though, so there's, in terms of determining whether or not this is the bottom, as Tesla said in its bottom, I've been kind of thinking about it, right? I think the easiest way to determine this is as follows, and it's really sometimes just that simple. So first and foremost, we are right now, in my opinion, in a very crucial stage of Tesla's movement, if you will, on the charts. Mainly because, so in the past, or not past, but I guess in the past, but we have been setting higher lows and lower lows. Lower lows, lower highs, right? Where we went all the way up here, low, lower low. Lower high, lower low. Lower high, lower low. Lower high, lower low. Lower high, lower low. Now we're potentially setting up what looks to be another lower high. And as this lower high is a valid lower high, as long as we don't really breach 200, in all honesty, as long as 200 does not get breached, we are essentially, whether it's here, whether it's 190, 185, whatever, anything under 200, if that ends up being the rejection zone, that means that Tesla is potentially once again setting in another lower high. And if that's the case, usually, at least in theory, what follows is going to be another lower low. That is technically a possibility. However, for the bulls and for the flip side, like I said, Tesla is also setting lower lows. However, if Tesla can actually get rejected from here, or 185, 90, 95, even 200, whatever. If Tesla gets, and probably most likely when it does get fully rejected, which could be right now, it comes down and then gets a, let's say we come down to 120 as an example, right? For instance, we come down to 120, even as low as like 113, and we bounce from there. well, Tesla has essentially set a higher low. And that's where things get really interesting, because then Tesla is essentially breaking this lower low, lower high pattern potentially on one of those moves. So whichever really happens first, if we set a higher low or a higher high, so essentially above 200, that essentially breaks that overall downtrend as well, in my opinion, at least for the medium term. Or if Tesla comes down and gets a solid bounce anywhere above this low here, that essentially sets in a higher low, which also breaks that lower low, lower high, chain reaction downtrend. So those are the most important things I would personally be paying attention to in the next coming months. Now, this will take a couple months most likely. This won't happen next week, tomorrow, even next month. This might take, honestly, another couple months for sure. Maybe, March, April, May, something like that. I would not be surprised if it takes that long to really determine, what's happening here. However, with that being said and done, I still personally would not be surprised if Tesla has a little bit of steam left. It usually does. Tesla usually does these kind of things. And we did talk about it before, how, the other times where Tesla has breached into oversold territories on the RSI, this of course being one of them right here. We visited this area on Friday, where, it breached it right over here, right? On this candle right here, I believe it was. Yeah, it was this candle right here. And then, it went up a little bit higher, but ultimately it did get a massive rejection. But then it still went just as high, if not arguably even higher, right? And same thing even happened here. The candle that put Tesla officially into oversold territory was this one right here. And then, it did find some weakness, some, sideways action or weakness or whatever, followed by another move even higher, which ended up actually kind of making like almost a bearish divergence, right? That's not completely uncommon. Same thing even over here. This was like this was a pretty, I would call this one an anomaly. I wouldn't put too much weight into this one. This is not something that will usually happen, but nonetheless, even regardless, right? You can see as Tesla started breaching into oversold territories, I found a little bit of weakness here in consolidation before just completely skyrocketing even further. Now, I don't think this will happen. I think this is like a substantial over exaggeration, but nonetheless, still, of course, worth looking into. Even all the way over here, Tesla pretty much went into oversold territories right around this area, found some weakness, and then still completely rallied. So Tesla tends to do these kind of moves pretty often, right? Where, it would enter oversold territories on the RSI, either consolidate, sideways, maybe show some weakness or whatever, and then most likely go up even higher. While the RSI most likely will set up a bearish divergence, where essentially as the stock makes a higher high, the RSI makes a lower high. So as an example, if Tesla, let's say, goes to, let's say 190, just, make things simple. Let's say Tesla goes to 190, but let's say we go a little bit lower. Let's say we go down to maybe even as low as realistic worst case, I would say for now, to keep this potential uptrend to, like, let's say 190, 200 intact. Let's say, this 145-ish level, right? That would essentially make the RSI most likely go down, let's say somewhere around here, just as an example, right? And then as Tesla comes down like that as well, and then let's say it goes up all the way over here to, let's say 190 or something like that, the RSI will most likely go up somewhere like here. You know what I mean? That's kind of the idea I'm thinking, where the stock makes a higher high, this RSI makes a lower high. And that right there is a bearish divergence setting up, and there is much more confirmation that we are most likely going to get an actual true rejection, and then finally most likely make our way down somewhere to the low 100s once again, which I would not be surprised whatsoever. But that's kind of what I'm personally envisioning right now, and that's why I'm personally I would not be surprised if Tesla absolutely still has steam left to reach to a slightly higher high. But again, the most important thing to pay attention to in terms of an overall narrative shift on the movement of the stock is, of course, can we set a swing high, or can we set in a higher low on the potential low swing in here? So again, either we go, whatever movement, blah, 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 but ultimately we come up all the way here and we set a higher high, breaking the old high on the previous swing high, or we come down and we set a higher low, breaking this trend as well, right? And then we go from there. So whichever one happens to come first. But again, it's also a massive possibility that neither happens, and instead all we do is come up, set up a lower low, a lower high, and then ultimately make a lower low once again, and just essentially continue resuming this trend that we've been in for the past year at this point or whatever, right? So just, food for thought. But that's essentially the overall picture that you'd want to be looking at in terms of how this move happens. But again, in terms of the shorter time frame, even as pretty much, let's say, first half of February or something like that, I would not be surprised if Tesla finds a little bit more weakness. Really would not be surprised if, potentially we see as low as the 140s, and then ultimately make our way back up potentially to, slightly higher than this, 185, 90, 95, maybe even as high as 200. And then we ultimately get the rejection, and then we start finally making, and forming the potential, new trend, if you will, where we potentially set a higher low or ultimately continue the trend and make a lower low. But that's essentially what I'm currently kind of expecting and waiting for, and being very, I guess, patient-ish, if you will. You can see the for the Bollinger Band, we're substantially higher than the green line, even after today's red day, which is, a pretty decent red day, 6%. That's a decent amount. We are still, of course, pretty much sitting right on top of this green line on the Bollinger Band. So that's something else to keep in mind as well, ladies and gentlemen. But all that being said, we are still above the 21 EMA. We are still above the 5 moving average. We're still above the 10-day moving average. So ultimately, Tesla is still, in my opinion, really seems a little bit more bullish than bearish, in my opinion, for now, at least, until something more happens. However, the current candlestick pattern that we set up today with being an inside day makes me think that Tesla might have a little bit more downside before we finally see that move back up to maybe, 190 or whatever, 200, something like that. And then from there, of course, we'll revisit it and determine how low we go from the actual true rejection if this one happens to not be it. But again, I want to make it very clear, there's a decent possibility that this happens to be the rejection, because this is, of course, a pretty decent area to reject at from the previous weekly closures that we had over here at 180 that held. And then once this broke is when real true hell actually broke loose on Tesla. Now, the final thing I want to mention before I wrap up this video and it gets too long is the fact that regardless of what happens here, I do believe that we are still potentially setting up a bullish pattern, being the cup and handle, where, either it happens on this 180 and then we have the candle and then we rally, or we go up to 200-ish, right, which is what I talked about, and we kind of go from here and then we set up a massive cup like this, and then the massive handle, and then we of course rally from there. So that is still also a very real possibility that I'm personally looking at and would be following very, very closely. But that is essentially what I'm seeing as of right now, ladies and gentlemen. Personally, I will not be looking to use to short Tesla or SPY, essentially buy puts, until either SPY hits 410 or Tesla hits pretty much 200. If none of those happen, I will not be entering puts. I will just simply sell calls and also sell actually some puts, as I did today on this red day, because I do believe there is more upside remaining for Tesla regardless. But yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching, guys. Let me know what you think down below, and I'll see you guys for the next one. Peace.